Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us at another FRS digital event. This event is Physics in the Spotlight, and we are looking at how physics can save the world. This event is kindly sponsored by the Ogden Trust, so a big thank you to them. My name is Andrew. I'm going to be your moderator today. The way the process is going to work, we're going to have two guest speakers who are going to talk about their work and how they got to where they are. If you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat for us. We will get to those at the end. And if you can keep your microphones muted and your cameras off, that would be really helpful. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to our first guest. Our first guest is Ruth. She's a Director of Strategy at the Low Carbon Contracts Company. She will tell you a little bit about what she does and how she got to where she is. So if that's all right with you, Ruth, I'm going to hand over to you now.
Thanks very much, Andrew. I'm just going to share some slides and talk you through a little bit about what I do. Delighted to be here. Oh, they've gone missing. Hang on, had them a second ago. And I think I should probably start by saying that that I am actually the Chief Executive of the Carbon Capture and Storage Association now, which is a new job. I've been in it for about 6 months, and I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about that. But I can also talk about what I did at the Low Carbon Contracts Company before that. I just had a couple of slides because I thought some pictures would be nice, but if I can get them, bear with me. I don't know why this is proving so difficult today. Aha, I think this is it. Can you see that, Andrew? Is that okay?
We certainly can, Ruth. That's fantastic. Thank you.
Great. I'm just trying to put it in the full screen mode, but it seems to be a bit slow. Right, there we go. So, as I said, I'm the Chief Executive of the Carbon Capture and Storage Association. Just going to tell you a little bit about the Carbon Capture Storage Association and Carbon Capture Utilisation and Storage, or CCUS. A little bit about what's happening with CCUS, and just a little bit about me, because I know this is a kind of careers talk as well. So, the Carbon Capture and Storage Association is a trade association. That means it's a group of companies that are working together and we're promoting commercial deployment of carbon capture, utilisation and storage. What do I mean by that? Well, that is a chain of technologies that together remove carbon dioxide either from power generation, maybe heavy industry like cement production or refining or steel production, hydrogen production, and also other types of power production such as bioenergy combustion with carbon capture and direct air capture from the air, so just membranes that take CO2 from the atmosphere. So there's different ways of capturing this carbon dioxide, and this is instead of it being emitted, as you see from the stacks that you see in heavy industrial areas, into the atmosphere. We capture that CO2. We transport the CO2, normally via a pipeline, but in some cases maybe also via ship or other means, and then that is stored in deep geological formations. So on the picture here, you can see there's a pipeline collecting the CO2 from all these different places and taking that CO2 deep under the seabed. So in the UK, we're looking at offshore storage, which is in a deep saline aquifer or depleted oil and gas field, about 1 kilometre under the seabed. And that's where it'll be stored for long periods of time, geological timeframes, millions of years. There's also some people looking at using CO2 in products, so creating cement that has a high quantity of CO2 in it and therefore traps the CO2 for long periods of time. But again, that's probably only like hundreds of years as opposed to sort of millions of years that we get with the geological storage. But the important thing is we're all about taking the CO2 and stopping it from getting into the atmosphere and storing it away. So, struggling to move this forward now. Just a moment. So the sort of stuff that I do is actually, I'm not the person actually working on these projects. I liaise with those people every week, the people that are actually the engineers designing this stuff. But what I do is I actually advocate for policy change within government to actually enable these technologies to be deployed as soon as possible. Every single day that we are not using these technologies, we're letting CO2 into the atmosphere. So this is a really important thing that we need to start scaling up and building this stuff all around the world to fight climate change. And we're really focused on commercial scale projects, so large projects. We want to be capturing millions and millions of tons of CO2, and we're looking at all different technologies available. And these are all the members of our association. So these are all the companies that are investing in this, putting their money into trying to actually get this technology working on a large scale. And there's a whole range of companies here, from, say, some of the heavy industries and power companies that are that have the current emissions that they want to get rid of. Some of the companies like carbon capture developers that are developing the technology, like Carbon Clean, are developing the technology to capture the CO2. And others are doing that too. And as I say, engineering companies and people that are looking at pipes and ports and what needs to happen to transport the CO2, as well as lots of people in legal financial consulting to support those people. What's happening with CCUS around the world? How important is it for the world? Well, this chart shows, it's from the International Energy Agency, and it shows that around 8 million tonnes of CO2 will be emitted into the atmosphere if we don't deploy carbon capture and storage on a range of applications, as you can see down the right hand side there. So we need to deploy it in the electricity sector, in industry, and also in fuel supply, as well as direct air capture, to make up for all the things that we can't capture from. In Europe, there are a number of what we call market-ready projects already, over 50 projects being developed, and there's lots of policy initiatives concerning those which we engage with as an association. In the UK, our Committee on Climate Change said in their 6th carbon budget advice that CCS is a necessity, not an option, and they said the UK needs to build at least 2 clusters. So these are similar to the picture I had, sites where perhaps you've got one storage site, a pipeline, and then a network of different capture sites, that we need to build at least 4 of them by the late 2020s and further clusters from 2030 onwards. And we actually need to be storing around over 100 million tonnes of CO2 a year by 2050. And as you can see, that's across a range of applications, as you can see in the chart on the right. And the 6th carbon budget was adopted into law. So you might be aware of the fact that the UK has a legally binding target to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 78% by 2035. And that was set in law in June last year. And that led to the net zero strategy, which you might have heard about, which was published by the government in October last year. And that included quite a big role for CCUS. It said we need to capture 30 million tonnes a year by 2030. 2030 is not that long away. It may sound far away to you, but a lot of these projects take many years to build. And so really the whole industry is now gearing up to work out how we can deliver that, working with the government on how quickly we need to build this stuff. But the government took the Committee on Climate Change's advice and committed to do 4 clusters by 2030. So first 2 of those have already been selected. So this is the UK, and you've got HyNet in the northwest, and the East Coast cluster in the northeast have already been selected as the first 2 clusters to move forward, and the Scottish cluster is a reserve. We have case studies of these clusters and what they look like. They're all quite different, but similar in that they are networks of pipelines leading to CO2 storage sites under the sea. And you can go on our website here, ccsassociation.org, and have a look at those. And some of them might be in your local area, and you can find out what companies are involved and what timescales they're working to. That's all I really wanted to say about CCS. a little bit about me. How did I get here, and why do I do this? So I didn't actually have a planned career path. I'm just curious, and I chose the subjects that fascinated me the most and that I found the most challenging, which at times I thought, why did I do this? I could have done a subject that was a lot easier. I'm sure I would have had more time in the park or whatever. But actually, I was just really curious and really interested, and that's what keeps me going. And I really like learning new things. So I was a sucker. I chose some tough subjects, but I really, really enjoyed them, and I learned so much about the world. And I've been the same with jobs. I've always just chosen a job that looked challenging, that was about change, where I'd learn something new, and it wouldn't be easy to begin with. And that's really sort of how I ended up where I ended up. I never regretted choosing physics, actually. I was really good at languages. I love French and Spanish. I would have loved to have done French and Spanish A-level. In fact, I did French A-level alongside maths, physics and further maths. And I loved other subjects. It was really hard to let them go. And I was better at some of them. But physics really taught me how to problem solve and really engage with everything in the world around me. And it served me really, really well in my job. I have to sit across the table from companies, engineers, very technical topics, and whatever they throw at me, because of my physics training, I can engage with that and I can ask the right questions, and it's just served me really well. And I suppose I'm not the best physicist. I'm a physicist really that has not done physics as a career, but I work with engineers and physicists week to week. I'm the one that goes and tries to explain to non-physicists about what we're trying to do. I have to speak to politicians. I've been in the House of Commons 3 times in the last few weeks talking about these technologies and why they're important. So I'm not the best physicist, and I'm certainly not the best CEO. I've been in the job 6 months. I'm still learning. Why I think it's really, really important to find something you're passionate about. For me, it's climate change, and work in that area, is because no matter how hard it gets, and all jobs get hard, and sometimes you find things that you just don't understand straight away, or you struggle with. If you're doing something you're really passionate about, that really keeps you going, and that helps you to be resilient, and you try your best every day, and hopefully you get to make a difference on something you really care about. So that's my advice. I don't know how relevant that is to you all, but that's a little bit about my story. I hope that was helpful.
Brilliant, Ruth. Thank you very much for that.
Sharing, yeah.
Really appreciate that. As we said at the beginning, if you've got any questions for Ruth, pop them in the chat and we'll come to them afterwards. What we're going to do now, we're going to move on to our next speaker, Maria, who's going to speak to you for a few minutes about what it is that she does. And then after Maria, we're going to move on to Nishal, who is going to talk about his experience as well. So Maria is the founder of GM Scientific, sorry. And if I hand over to you now, Maria, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be fantastic. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Yeah, so I started a business 4 years ago. My journey has been I also have a physics background, but I had a bit of a more, let's say, I didn't have the direct route in. I didn't know physics was for me before a bit later on, so I had to go back and do my A-levels before being able to start to go to university. And when I first got started, I sort of loved it and I thought I wanted a career in academia. So I stayed on, did my PhD, but again, you come to the end of that and have to make some choices. And I think, if I'm honest, I didn't really know what was right for me. So I got a job in a spin-off company in the physics department, and I started work. And that was very interesting, working for a small business, because you need to take on a lot of roles. And having been there a number of years, eventually I thought it was time to do something else. So I asked whether I could buy my way in, maybe to this business, become part of the business and help run it. That wasn't an option. So I started my own business instead. And yeah, so about 4 years ago, I left, borrowed some money and found a lab to rent. I'm doing a business in science, if you like. So I'm sort of using my science background. I'm doing more chemistry, I should say, that I'm doing physics. And my speciality is manufacturing a type of plastic, a polycarbonate plastic, which is sensitive to radiation. So you use it as a radiation sensor. It's a very nice and simple technology, and it's used to measure radon gas, which is something you'd come across if you ever buy or sell a house. Or it's also used to monitor people working in nuclear power stations. So it's used as part of making sure people are basically safe if they're working in a radiation environment. I maybe should add too that I sold the business 3 months ago, so I'm not the founder anymore. But I'm now part of a much bigger company, the world leading radon measurement lab. They bought me up because I manufacture one of the components that are essential to them. So my job has changed a bit. I'm the managing director of their UK business now, and I'm still doing the same, but this has also opened opportunities for me to do more research and development. So I still hope to spend a good chunk of my time in the lab, where try and develop new materials. When you first start looking at what can be done in the world of science, you'll always find something that's missing. So the fun bit is to try and find the time as well to get in the lab and develop the new things, I would say. But actually, the most of my time I'm spending running the business. So I would also say physics has been a great training for running a business, because you're not scared of numbers. And I think when you're running a business, for me, the biggest thing, and also in the process of selling the business, not being scared of looking at the finances and understanding those bits is very, very helpful. It means it's easy to have the conversations. You're comfortable with numbers. And I think that's a very, very useful thing. And in all the other problems you come up with, physics it's the problem solving. The problem solving is going to help you. It also helps you as a mum or as a parent at times, whether it's from fixing little things or solving other things. I think it's a very general, useful skill. So it isn't easy studying it. I'll agree. I thought when I did my A-levels, I was thinking to myself, why am I trying to do this? I basically thought to myself, I can see why people hate this subject. And I think sometimes you just need to get through the hard phase, and because studying at university, that's I never regretted going into it, because it was just when you get to more and more when you get into more and more details, if you like, it's really a lot of fun. You start to see why, and you start to appreciate all the different connections. But you need to learn a lot of maths and other things first before you can come to appreciate the detail. I think that's maybe the hard bit of physics. But so I think that is pretty much a little whisk through my story. I have started, so I like what I do, I should say. I think it's fun what I do, but I'm not necessarily going to stick around doing what I'm doing either in the long run. I'm also quite keen on doing something for the environment. So I'm looking at the moment to develop some materials for potentially generating power from space. So my eyes are elsewhere. This is quite, if you like, sci-fi like work, because it's very early days in this sort of business. We're literally putting things together, creating them, testing them, seeing whether, just because the science says this might work, when you start putting reality to it and actually making it into something real, it doesn't always work. So at the moment, it's just experimenting, if you like. And if we get anywhere, then the dream is, I'd say, to go into something renewable rather than stick around and making plastic forever. So yeah, I think that's me.
Thank you so much for that, Maria. Really interesting. Again, physics is core to your work, science is core to your work, but a really different side of things to what Ruth's doing. So that's really interesting, and thank you for sharing that with us. Again, if you've got any questions, please pop them in the chat, and we will come back to Maria and Ruth at the end if we've got any time. What we're going to do now, we're going to move on to our third and final speaker, Nishul. Nishul is an entrepreneur and an angel investor with an interest in climate and nature, and a background in finance and fintech I believe is correct, Nishul. So if I hand over to you now, would you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing now, and how you got to where you are? That would be fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Firstly, it's really interesting to hear Ruth and Maria's story here, and hopefully I can follow up and justify just as well. I when I was at school, I think I was slightly different to Maria and Ruth in that I actually really loved physics, in that I felt it was exactly the right fit for me. It was probably, out of all the subjects I studied, I mean, Ruth talked about how she was better at other subjects. I was better at maths and physics than I was at anything else, I think. And, that obviously made it easy for me to choose in terms of what I wanted to do when I went into my A levels. As Ruth said, I just followed what I was interested in. I think it was also easy, like maths and physics are very highly regarded subjects, and everyone, whenever you want to go and do that, people will generally encourage you to do it. Especially when I was young, boys were encouraged to do it. Hopefully now, obviously, girls are being encouraged to do it as well, because I think there's so much talent there which is not being utilized potentially if they go and choose other careers, but they're good at this. Anyhow, so I ended up doing maths, physics, chemistry at my A levels, and then I was thinking, what am I going to do now? And when I go and study, and I thought about maybe I'll go and do something in business, or maybe I'll go and do engineering. And I actually very distinctly remember having a talk with my careers advisor at the college I was at, and they said that if I go into business, I won't be able to go into engineering afterwards. But if I do engineering, engineers are prized in business and in many other fields. And so I thought that was an easy answer for me then to go into engineering. And engineering was the one I definitely was more interested in as well. And I think I realized over the years why engineers are so highly prized. And I learned that from my degree, and I think Maria touched upon this in terms of problem solving, you learn how to frame problems. Like, let's say you may have a problem to solve and you've got 20 different things you've got to look at. And what you learn to do is really figure out what's important and what isn't in terms of deciding what's going to influence the answer. And you get a sense and you get an intuition for it. And that skill actually really helps you go on to do good problem solving in many other careers. And problem solving is probably one of the most important skills I think anyone can ever have. I mean, I went on in the end after that. I graduated and then I went into finance and I worked for a few banks for a little while. And then I was very lucky and I fell into a group of people who were just starting out a little business at the time in a barn in St. Albans next to a field of sheep. And I remember being told about it, and went to visit them, and I expected for some reason there to be horses on one side and an office on the other. I don't know why I thought that. Anyway, I went and I met these people, and I thought these guys, this group of people is really smart and sharp. And so I fell in with them, and then a few weeks later we incorporated a business which was providing data for financial markets, in particular in credit derivatives, which was an area back in 2002 which was up and coming. And so we went and built a business around pricing that. And again, all my maths and engineering skills really important in that being numerate was very critical, because we were a data business and finance is very driven by numbers. So that's one of the reasons why actually, you can go and be an engineer and go into finance. And also you can go into consulting as well, because that's also framing and solving problems. Anyway, so I spent about 9 years there. I did a lot of different things. So I did a bit of coding, I did a lot of data work, and ultimately I ended up becoming more on the business side and dealing much more with clients and helping launch new products. And we had really good team, and I was very privileged to be part of that. And the business, after 9 years, I felt it was time for me to leave. But by that point, the business had grown from about 7 or 8 people when I joined to 1,500 people. And so it was like an incredible success story. It felt really good. Time for me to go though. And I then left. And then I thought, what do I want to do now? And then I thought, okay, what about startups? And Market had been a startup, and I thought that was really exciting and really enjoying being part of something bigger than myself and building something bigger than myself and feeling like I really played a key part in it. And so I went and started advising startups, and I also learned, again, actually, like science and business can actually be really similar in some respects, because when you're launching a new business, there's a lot of unknowns, a lot of things to figure out, and a lot of assumptions, and you need to experiment, just like you do just like Maria did with the lab with her products, right? And so it's definitely very much more of a part of the thinking that entrepreneurs have nowadays, is that when you launch a new business, don't don't necessarily just try and think this is going to work. You have to go and test assumptions. You have to go and figure that out. And so I basically, over the last decade, have been just got involved with loads of different startups in loads of different ways. I've launched a couple more myself. One is a vegan sweets business, and one was a online travel business. And a lot of lessons learned from the travel one, because it did not do well. It didn't, and I really realized like how what I should have stuck to is what I'd known at that point, and it was a very different kind of world, and my approach was all wrong. But I look back and I learned so much in that, some lessons which I wouldn't have learned at market, because things have to go wrong sometimes for you to be able to reflect and think, okay, this is what I won't do next time, right? And this is this is the mistakes I made. And anyway, I've actually in the last few years been thinking, what is it I really want to work on? And I mean, generally, I've been a bit unfocused in terms of working on all kinds of businesses over the last decade. But in the last few years, I really started to think, okay, this is where I want to have an impact. And so I'm a scuba diver. I don't know if anyone's ever scuba dived. There you go, Ruth has. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever done in my life. It's such a beautiful world down there. And, I was starting to become aware how climate change was causing a problem for coral reefs, because they are causing the reefs. The corals are very sensitive to temperature, and warming of the air is warming the seas, which is causing the corals to unfortunately die out in some parts of the world. And I thought, well, I'd really like to do something to help mitigate that. And to be honest, I was a bit lost for a while, because I was like, what do I know about coral reefs, and what do I know about climate change? And I had to kind of cast around a little bit to figure out where I can actually start helping out. And I realized actually recently is that, I looked at a couple of business ideas, but then I realized recently what I'm good at is really helping a lot of founders and develop their business. And so lately, in the last year or so, I've been focusing on advising startups, particularly focused on climate change and biodiversity, to help them try and get their business going. Because if their business doesn't get going, they can't do anything to help the environment. And actually, one of the companies I've been helping out is actually a CCS startup. So it's very, very interesting to see Ruth's presentation. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I think I definitely look back at maths and physics as being fundamental to my career. As Maria said, again, with financial modeling, I think it helps you learn how to think. That's one of the most, and it's hard to explain that, but like being able to look at a problem and deconstruct it and break it down, that's what physics and engineering really teaches you. And if you're interested in it, I do recommend following that path, and many options will be open to you. You don't actually even have to decide what you're going to do with your career. As I've gone in a variety of routes, and as I think Maria and Ruth. So that's it from me, I think.
Thank you so much, Nishal. Really, really interesting. Because we've had 3 speakers today, we don't actually have any time to put any questions to any of them, but I'd like to say a huge thank you to all 3 speakers, all given some fantastic perspectives. And I think the thing I've taken away from it most is the way you can combine physics and science with the commercial aspect. I think all 3 are doing that from a different perspective and having a positive impact on the world around them as well. So I think that's fantastic. Big thank you to all 3 speakers. Huge thank you to the Ogden Trust for sponsoring this event. If you would like to see any more content like this, if you would like to have an opportunity to hear from more fantastic speakers like Ruth, Maria and Nishal, please have a look at our website at Founders for Schools. I hope we see you at our next FRS Digital event, but from me and from Founders for Schools, thank you and see you next time. Bye-bye.